Suddenly I saw Margarita, and I was caught. Company, come on into the jailhouse, rock with me, let's rock. We're going up. If you can look right ahead, don't fall all the way, baby, trying to get to you. Knock me down, step in my face, slander my name all over the place. But all Lord Almighty, I feel my temperature rising. We can't go on together with suspicious minds. On the sea, lonely. Oh, why can't my dream come true? I've loved, I've laughed and cried. You were always on my mind. Always on my mind. Falling in love.
Elvis Presley wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was something we still don't fully understand. An icon so massive, so magnetic, that he practically invented modern fame, and then got crushed by it. People think they know him. The jumpsuits, the screaming fans, the tragic ending. But behind the glitter and the headlines was a man constantly at war with the machine that made him. A man who gave his voice, his image, and eventually his sanity just to keep the world entertained. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't trying to be. But what if the so-called fall of Elvis wasn't really a fall at all? Just the slow collapse of someone holding up an entire era. The crazy part? Elvis never asked to be a myth. He just wanted to sing. But somewhere between Graceland and the White House, between gospel choirs and Vegas stages, Elvis became too big for his own life. And by the time anyone noticed, it was already too late. So, what really happened to the man behind the legend? And why does his story still hit so hard decades later? Let's rewind. Before the rhinestones, before the Vegas residencies, before the world started calling him the king, Elvis Presley was just a shy kid from Tupelo, Mississippi, who grew up in a two-room house with no money, no connections, and no reason to believe the world would ever know his name. But there was something in him, something different. He grew up surrounded by gospel choirs and blues music, sneaking into black churches just to soak up the sound. He didn't just hear music. He felt it, deep in his bones. And when he sang, people could feel it too. By the time he cut his first record at Sun Records in Memphis, that voice didn't sound like anything on the radio. It was raw, it was wild, it was dangerous, and it scared people in a good way. But here's the thing. Elvis didn't blow up overnight because of industry connections or slick marketing. He blew up because the energy he brought to the stage felt alive. Black audiences saw someone finally giving credit to the sound they created. White audiences? They'd never seen anyone move like that or make that kind of noise on national television. When Elvis hit the Ed Sullivan Show in 1956, nearly 60 million people tuned in. That's over 80% of American TV households at the time. That's not a concert. That's a cultural event. And just like that, rock and roll had a new face. And that face, with its curled lip, hip thrusts, and southern drawl, belonged to a 21-year-old who still lived with his parents. But while the world was watching the birth of a new kind of star, Elvis, he was just trying to keep up. Here's something people love to bring up. Elvis didn't even write his own songs. And sure, that's technically true. But let's be real. Elvis didn't need to write the music. He was the music. What made him iconic wasn't a pen and paper. It was the way he could take a song, any song, and make it sound like it came straight from his soul. That's what real performers do. They don't just sing the lyrics. They make you feel them. Take All Shook Up. The story goes that Elvis just mentioned the phrase after a weird dream, and someone else ran with it. But when Elvis recorded it, he owned it. Nobody remembers the songwriter. They remember him. And those songwriting credits, A lot of them were just business. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, cut deals with writers to give Elvis a share of royalties. It wasn't Elvis demanding that. It was the industry doing what it does, milking every drop of fame for profit. Elvis even admitted it himself in a 1957 interview. He said, "I never wrote a song in my life." He wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. He knew his lane, and he stayed in it. His power was in delivery, in energy, in presence. Same goes for his guitar. People love to joke that he couldn't really play, but the truth is, he used it as a prop because he didn't need it to lead the band. When Elvis stepped on stage, all eyes were already on him. The guitar was just decoration. He didn't want to be seen as a Bob Dylan or a Beatles-style auteur. He wanted to be the connection point, the lightning rod that made people feel something real. And if you've ever seen him perform If I Can Dream or Suspicious Minds Live, you know he succeeded. Once Elvis hit icon status, he didn't just become famous. He became unreal. People stopped seeing him as a person and started treating him like a symbol. And that kind of fame, it does something to you. So yeah, Elvis had quirks. He collected badges. He loved guns. He was obsessed with karate. He kept a pet chimpanzee named Scatter, who reportedly chased women and bit the staff. It all sounds bizarre, because it was. But here's the part people miss. These weren't signs of someone losing his mind. They were survival tactics. When your every move is tracked, when you can't walk into a diner without causing a riot, when your manager controls everything from your love life to your movie roles, you start building a world of your own. A little bubble where you call the shots, even if that means impersonating a cop on the highway for kicks or deep frying peanut butter sandwiches in the middle of the night. It wasn't about being reckless. It was about feeling real. And it's not like he was hiding it. Elvis was out here handing out fake tickets to fans he pulled over, but signing them with autographs. He wasn't trying to be dangerous. He just wanted to play, to connect, to feel something normal in a life that stopped being normal before he turned 22. He didn't see the badges or the sirens as props. He saw them as pieces of a version of himself he never got to become. A Southern boy who once dreamed of being a cop or a soldier, not the most famous man in the world. That's the thing people forget. Elvis wasn't trying to be a myth. He was trying to be himself. But somewhere along the way, the myth took over. In 1958, at the height of his fame, Elvis disappeared. No scandals, no press conference, just gone. The reason? He got drafted into the U.S. Army. And while the headlines called it patriotic and noble, which it was, the truth behind the scenes was a lot messier. Elvis didn't want to leave. He was terrified that the music world would move on without him. That the moment he stepped away, he'd be replaced, forgotten. And for someone who had just barely found his voice, that was a nightmare. But he still went. He traded his mic for a uniform, became a truck driver for the armored division, and tried to play the role of a regular guy. Even as fans camped outside the base and climbed walls just to get a glimpse of him. Then, something happened that changed him forever. His mother, Gladys, the one person who kept him grounded, passed away. And when Elvis came back for her funeral, something in him was different. He was quiet, lost, numb. That grief didn't go away. He carried it back with him to Germany, where he started leaning on pills just to function. Amphetamines during the day, sedatives at night. Nothing wild at first. Just enough to get through the days. But it planted a seed. People think the fame broke him, but it was the loss that cracked him open. And once the cracks were there, the pressure of being Elvis did the rest. He still smiled for the cameras, still signed autographs, but inside, he was trying to fill a void that couldn't be fixed with applause. Loving Elvis Presley wasn't easy, and being loved by him, that came with its own set of rules. He had women everywhere, screaming at concerts, crying outside hotels, sending him thousands of letters a week. To most people, he was untouchable. But deep down, Elvis craved something real. The problem? Fame doesn't let you love like a normal person. That's where Priscilla came in. They met in Germany when she was just 14. He was 24, already a global star, already exhausted by it. It's easy to look at their age difference and call it inappropriate. And you wouldn't be wrong to raise eyebrows. But the truth is, what unfolded between them wasn't just scandal. It was complicated. It was a young man grasping for innocence in a world that had already taken his. Elvis didn't want just a girlfriend. He wanted an escape. Someone untouched by the industry. Someone he could shape into his version of normal. Priscilla later admitted it felt like she was being turned into a doll. Elvis told her how to dress, what colors to wear, even how to do her makeup. To the outside world, it looked like control. But from inside Graceland, it looked like someone trying to freeze time, to hold on to something pure in a life where everything was curated, managed, and monetized. He didn't want her to be just another Hollywood flame. He wanted her to be his anchor, his constant. But even that wasn't enough. Elvis couldn't stay faithful, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to give himself fully to someone without losing the image that everyone else demanded. And Priscilla, she loved him. But eventually, even she had to walk away. Still, they never truly let each other go. Even after the marriage ended, the connection never did. Because when you've shared that much pressure, that much spotlight, that much loneliness, the bond doesn't just disappear, it just changes. By the early 1970s, Elvis was still Elvis, but the world around him had changed. The Beatles had taken over. The counterculture was rising. Rock music was evolving fast. And Elvis? He was stuck in a glittering, suffocating version of himself that no longer felt real. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had locked him into a relentless cycle of Vegas residencies and movie contracts, most of them low budget, low effort, and creatively draining. Elvis wanted to act in serious films. He wanted roles with depth. But the industry wanted Elvis, the jumpsuit, the hip shake, the brand. And the more they boxed him in, the more he tried to break out in his own ways. He leaned into karate. He carried guns, not as threats, but as shields. He surrounded himself with friends, yes, but also yes men, people who couldn't tell him no. Because when you've been turned into a product, sometimes power is the only thing that still feels like yours. He still performed, still hit the stage with sweat pouring down his face, giving fans everything he had, even when he had almost nothing left. But here's the part people forget. He never stopped showing up, even when his health declined, even when the weight gain became a punchline, even when the pills blurred the edges of reality. He kept performing. Why? Because the stage was the only place that still felt like home. And maybe deep down, he thought if he could just keep singing, keep giving, keep being Elvis, he could outrun the collapse that was quietly closing in around him. Just when people started whispering that Elvis was done, that he'd become a relic of the past, he did something no one expected. He came back. The year was 1968. Elvis was tired of the corny movies, the fake smiles, the Vegas lounge act version of himself. He wanted to remind people, and maybe himself, who he really was. So he stripped it all down. No big band, no glitter, just him, a microphone, and a black leather outfit that basically melted every TV in America. The '68 comeback special wasn't just a performance. It was a full-blown resurrection. Elvis stood in a ring of fire and silence and sang like his life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. And the world saw it. That voice, still there. The swagger, untouchable. The connection, deeper than ever. He wasn't the same boy from Sun Records, but he wasn't trying to be. This was a grown man, bruised, vulnerable, and powerful, in a way no one expected. Critics called it his greatest performance ever. Fans lost their minds. And for the first time in years, Elvis was in control. But here's the thing about comebacks. They don't always fix the damage. They just prove you were never really gone. Even after the special, Elvis was still fighting uphill battles with his health, his manager, the industry, and himself. But that night in '68, that was proof. The fire never left him. Not for a second. It was always there, burning under the surface, waiting for a chance to roar. Elvis's final years are often reduced to a punchline. The jumpsuits, the weight gain, the pills, the tragic death in a bathroom. But that version of the story? It's lazy. It misses the point. Because even at his lowest, Elvis Presley was still giving everything he had. The man was exhausted, medicated, and carrying more weight than any human should ever have to. And he still got up on stage and gave people a show. Night after night, city after city, he sang with a voice that could still shake a room. He smiled for fans even when he could barely stand. And behind the curtain, he kept chasing something deeper. Faith? Healing? Maybe even redemption. He wasn't just spiraling, he was enduring. Sure, he had his vices. The drug use was real, a cocktail of prescriptions from doctors who saw him more as a paycheck than a patient. But in Elvis's mind, he wasn't abusing anything. These were medications, signed off by professionals, meant to help him sleep, perform, survive. He thought he was doing what he had to do to keep being Elvis, because for him, there was no other version of life. And even as his body gave out, his spirit didn't. He was still cracking jokes, still obsessing over music, still calling Priscilla late at night just to talk. When he died in August 1977 at only 42 years old, the world didn't just lose a rock star. It lost one of the only people who ever truly understood what it meant to be famous, in a way that no one else could be. He was flawed, fragile, overwhelmed, and somehow still magnificent to the very end. Elvis Presley didn't get a fairy tale ending. He didn't ride off into the sunset. He died young, alone, and exhausted. The price of carrying a crown no one else could even lift. But maybe that's the part we keep missing. Maybe Elvis didn't fall from grace. Maybe he just gave too much of himself to a world that only wanted the version of him it could sell. The sparkly one, the sexy one, the one who never aged, never cried, never asked for help. But behind the myth was a man who never stopped searching for peace, for love, for meaning. Someone who survived more pressure, more isolation, and more expectation than any pop star before him, and still showed up. Even now, his name moves generations. His music plays everywhere from weddings to TikToks. His story? Still too big to fully explain. And maybe that's the point. Because if Elvis Presley couldn't survive being Elvis Presley, who could? So here's the real question. Was Elvis a victim of his fame? Or the only one who ever truly mastered it? Let us know what you think.